This is the story of two men who went to fight a murderous regime in Syria.
I started seeing what was on the TV, what was portrayed as the regime attacking innocent people.
In 2011, President Bashar al-Assad brutally put down a popular revolt, sparking an even bloodier civil war. 200,000 people have died.
I want a very clear message to go to President Assad that nothing is off the table.
In 2013, as the dictator turned his armies and chemical weapons against his people, Western governments, including Britain, considered military action.
The video footage illustrates some of the most sickening human suffering imaginable.
But a failed vote in Parliament left the government unable to intervene, and I've spoken to two men who claim they went to Syria around the same time to do what the government couldn't: protect innocent civilians.
For me, that's part of British values, to stick up for the weak against the oppressor.
But the effective takeover last year by the so-called Islamic State, or ISIS, has further fueled fears of an attack here.
We are many in numbers, and we will take your lives, inshallah, bi-idhnillah.
And the government's policy on Syria appears to have changed. It says the priority now is to keep dangerous Brits out, leaving many stuck in the conflict.
You will only be allowed to come home on our terms.
But hundreds are already home, living in communities across Britain. For the first time, I've spoken to two such men. They claim they've never fought for ISIS, but are living in fear. This is Ibraheem. It's not his real name. He's concerned about what will happen if the security services find out about him. He tells me he went to Syria on two separate occasions between 2012 and 2013. He claims he went to protect civilians being attacked by the regime of Bashar al-Assad.
Watching what was happening over there on the news channels, it was heartbreaking. The intention was, to be a Rambo or something, to go there and make change and help the people get rid of this dictator.
So was there a recruitment process for you here in the UK?
I mean, if you can call the TV channels a recruiter, then they are the recruiters.
So there was no YouTube videos of radical preachers, there was no talks in mosques, there was no imams?
No, I mean, they say a picture says 1,000 words. And when those pictures are moving pictures, and those pictures are of a mother holding a dead 2-year-old in her arms, you don't need a preacher to tell you what's going on there is wrong.
On Ibrahim's first visit, he says he made his way to Turkey with an aid convoy, but he slipped away and jumped the border into Syria. He claims to have ended up with the Islamist group Ahrar al-Sham, one of the largest rebel factions fighting the army of President Bashar al-Assad. But his own account of the battlefield couldn't be more different to the videos pumped out on the internet by Islamist groups.
When you see it on the films, it doesn't look too difficult. You point, you aim, you squeeze the trigger. That's all it is, really.
Is that what it was like?
I couldn't tell you. I was never actually in a situation or involved in that kind of firefight. I think I only shot 2 or 3 bullets maybe in the whole time I was there. It's not like in the films. I meant well. I wanted to do good. I ended up not doing very much.
Ahrar al-Sham says it's focused on the conflict in Syria. At times, when they share the same local military aims, the group has worked with Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front and the Western-backed Free Syrian Army. It's also fought both alongside and against ISIS. But the mainly Syrian men in Ibrahim's brigade were far from experienced.
We saw a tank go past, and we were like, how are we going to deal with this? And we asked if there was anyone experienced to fire an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade. And none of them were. It gave you an idea as to how badly trained these people were.
No one knew how to...
No one knew how to fire an RPG from the people that were there. The only guy I remember injuring anyone or getting injured was one guy who shot himself in the foot with his AK-47. These are students, they're engineers, they're computer scientists, they're bakers, they're stonemasons. They are not soldiers.
Do you consider yourself a terrorist?
I mean, that's a preposterous question. It's an insulting question. On what basis am I a terrorist? Just because I went to help a people against a brutal regime? No, of course not. Of course I don't.
The second man, who we're calling Musa, was in Syria for almost 6 months until earlier last year. He tells me he too was horrified at the slaughter of civilians at the hand of the Assad regime.
Especially the elderly women, the children, when they were being killed by a brutal regime. I think that really affected me and it touched me. And I thought I could do something to help one way or another. And that's what pushed me to go.
Musa claims to have never fought for ISIS, but won't say which group he joined. What he does say is that he was careful about which group he chose.
I figured that it was the right group for me. And in a way, when I say right group, it's the group that I agree with in the sort of goals and aims and objectives.
And what were those goals and objectives?
Well, the number one is to get rid of the Assad regime. Other than that, it was establishing a strong political presence in a country where people are treated with respect and people have the freedom of religion and freedom of expression.
Did you kill anybody?
No. I say no because even though I was there for 5 months or so, I didn't take part in any direct battle.
Was that very different to what you thought it would be like?
Absolutely. I think I was gearing myself to, as soon as I went into the country, to be shelled, with mortar shells and be under absolute fire. But when I went in there, it was completely different.
ISIS didn't exist in Syria during Ibrahim's first visit, but from April 2013 they began capturing vast swathes of territory in Syria and then Iraq. When Ibrahim returned, he said the militants' presence had fundamentally changed the revolution to the advantage of the Assad regime.
It was dire. The whole dynamic of the whole situation had changed as a result of the presence of ISIS.
How had it changed?
Previously, the Syrian people would love to see foreigners there. They used to welcome them. The rebels were on the front foot. They were pushing Bashar al-Assad's guys back. You were hearing of one victory after another. And the second time, not only were the rebels stagnant, but they had actually lost ground. And now they were fighting among themselves. And when I say fighting, it was ISIS against the various other factions. I was very suspicious of them. These would be the last guys I'd ever give allegiance to.
This is how ISIS portray life under their rule. Ibraheem visited a town under their control the day after the residents had held a peaceful protest. He says the response was far from smiles and justice.
Instead of trying to find out what the problem was or the grievance was, ISIS shot at them and killed over 17 of these protesters, peaceful protesters. And then they found the guy that they thought was responsible for the protest, executed him, and then stuck his body in the middle of the marketplace for everybody to see. The people have had enough.
What do you think of ISIS?
I think that they are a very extreme organisation. Therefore, I disagree with them from an Islamic point of view. And also, I also disagree from a revolutionary or a fighting point of view as well. Because a lot of things that they do in battle, like chopping people's heads off and having no mercy, is things that they're not moral.
Of the 600 or so British men thought to have gone to fight in Syria, some 300 are believed to have returned. And in the wake of the attacks in Paris, the security services are warning of a possible attack here.
Are UK fighters returning to the UK? Are they a threat to this country?
Are they coming back? They probably are coming back. Are they a threat? I mean, look, I still struggle to understand where this idea comes from that just because you go there, that you're going to be a threat to the UK.
But there are those that have threatened the UK.
Listen, you get mad people in all walks of life who their madness would be manifested in one way or another.
These people are not just mad, are they?
They are mad. What else would you call them?
They've got a political ideology or a religious ideology, and they have overtly threatened the UK. But not only that, they're trained. Surely they're dangerous.
These are madmen who have found a political ideology to cling on to somehow justify their madness. I mean, make no mistake, this is not the behaviour of a normal human being.
The government thinks that people returning are dangerous to this country, to the UK. Are you dangerous? Are you
Absolutely
dangerous to the UK?
not. It's my country. It's like we need to find an enemy. And right now, for some reason, and at this point, and it's the government, not the people, the government says, let's just point the finger at the Muslims.
Have the security services ever spoken to you?
About Syria? No.
You weren't stopped at the airport?
No.
The government is now fast-tracking new counter-terrorism legislation, which would see the introduction of temporary exclusion orders, leaving British fighters stranded unless they adhere to strict conditions.
What do you think about these proposals?
I think that it's absolutely ridiculous, because a lot of people who go to Syria, they go for humanitarian purposes.
How about the guys that are beheading people over there, the Brits that have beheaded people over there? Should they be allowed back to the UK?
I think that the security of the UK is very important. I think it'd be very difficult to have them back in the UK after explicitly saying that they oppose UK citizens and that they'll commit violent actions in the UK. However, there are other methods, I think. Perhaps putting people through a rehab period.
Why create enemies? I mean, you're now pushing them into a corner. You're telling them, we want you as our enemy. If this government keeps on saying, you're an enemy, you're an enemy, you're an enemy, there's going to become a point when one of these guys says, fine, I'll be your enemy. You're forcing them into a corner.
Both men left Syria before the government's temporary exclusion measures were proposed. But there are fears that keeping young Brits within the grasp of extremists could be making matters worse.
I was happy to get out. I wasn't comfortable there. I wasn't happy there. And I'm sure a lot of Brits right now are very uncomfortable about what's happening there. They probably had an idea as to what they wanted to go there and do, but found that the reality on the ground is very different and feel that they are stuck and unable to come back, which is a shame because these guys don't want to be there. And the longer they are there, then there might be the potential for radicalisation.
Channel 4 News can't independently verify either man's account, but each of their stories have one similar conclusion. Both went to Syria full of anger over the deaths of innocent civilians. Both left disillusioned. They were able to return before the cordon went up. But many like them now face a choice: stay in Syria or return to live under the watchful eye of the state.